Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to Variable 73. So today we're going to talk about the House of the Dragon Comic-Con trailer. So let's take a look at the trailer in this episode, right? And so we know what we're talking about. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, which is the full title, is a prequel series to HBO's Game of Thrones, which itself is loosely, and I mean very loosely, based on George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire setting. Several years ago, George R. R. Martin, working with the two people who are like the lore masters of his setting. Prior to them, Martin basically had no really organized notes or anything on the setting. He just free wrote it all. Those two people are Elio M. Garcia Jr. and Linda Antonsen. They worked to compile a book called The World of Ice and Fire. This book was supposed to be all the backstory behind the setting. Oh, excuse me, it's getting late around here. Excepting anything that could reveal the outcome of the main book series. Okay. So for your reference purposes, Martin is writing the main books, but he also occasionally publishes like a short story or novella about like the characters Dunk and Egg or some other stuff. Now the problem, as one of his co-authors pointed out, which led us to this TV show basically, is that the compiled book they already done was thousands upon thousands of pages. The goal was to produce something. My copy of A World of Ice and Fire is unreachable. It's storage in my other room, unpacked. I'm not going to unpack it until I move next year. So, but it was supposed to be something like around like a game of A World of Ice and Fire is maybe a little thicker than this and a little taller. So it's a very beautiful looking book, but what they wound up getting was something that looked more like that Webster's Dictionary that's like 5 inches thick. And whatnot. So that was unpublishable as it stood. Okay, so they decided to break it up, and what resulted was the smaller World of Ice and Fire that I told you about, and several forthcoming books. The first one to be released was Blood and Fire, which was supposed to have a sequel called Fire and Blood, and that would be the complete history of House Targaryen prior to the time period of A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones for the TV people. Okay? Now, the next problem is Martin has decided not to finish the sequel to finish Fire and Blood, the second book of the two books, until after he completes the whole A Song of Ice and Fire series, which sadly means we'll probably never see it. So take that a little bit of information at the end as you please when it comes to watching this TV show. On the one hand, we do know in fact that it ends. The histories of the time period have been outlined for over 20 years. So they know how it ends, they know who dies, they know who lives, they know and all that sort of stuff. Okay? But on the other hand, depending on where they choose to end the showrunners may have to make up a lot of the details of how that ending actually works itself out. That's basically what happened in Game of Thrones from seasons like midway through season 4 forward when a lot of stuff started changing from the books. So what do we need to know to understand this? Okay, it's one thing. It's not very spoiler swift. You can look this up in any existing book and see it. It's part of the family tree. I'm going to put it up here. Okay? So you need to kind of understand this bit of the family tree on the screen so that you can so that you have an idea of what these characters are fighting about, okay? So there are other children and siblings and spouses of all these characters who do appear in the show, but these are the primary players and how they're related, okay? Jaehaerys the first Targaryen, and Alicent Targaryen had two children that are relevant here, mainly relevant. They had Aemon Targaryen and Baelon Targaryen, okay? Aemon Targaryen had a daughter named Rhaenys Targaryen, who in the show is Rhaenys Velaryon, if I understand what they're changing correctly, okay? His son Baelon had two sons with two different wives. The older was Viserys Targaryen, who was not the Viserys in Game of Thrones, but his one of his sort of aunts, one of the characters he was named after. Okay, and the younger son was Daemon Targaryen. Viserys had Rhaenyra Targaryen, who was the young girl you see in the show in the clip, and Aegon the Second Targaryen. Okay, so who is not the Aegon, who is not the Aegon who you hear about in the TV in time of the TV show, which is like 200 years after this. Okay, so bear that all in mind. Now, Also to note, because I believe from the trailer it indicates that they, instead of starting back here where it makes sense, back around the time of Jaehaerys and Alsain and the events that lead to Aemon and Balon and then Aemon dying and all that, before he becomes the king. They're jumping right in at the point where Viserys has passed over his brother Daemon, who should be his proper heir, for Rhaenyra. Okay, for am I right? Passed over. Yeah, if I'm remembering the sequence of this all correctly, it's kind of late now, but that's roughly what happened. Okay, so and okay, so let's just look at the trailer now. It's gonna have subtitles but no audio. Okay. We'll make it a little bigger so you guys can see it. There we go. Okay, so we have Laenor. Okay, Laenor Valerian, one of the characters talking. He's another sibling of Rhaenyra Valerian, if I remember. If they're talking about the right Laenor, okay. So Viserys, who's talking now, there he is. The only one I know on site is Daemon Targaryen, who's being played by Matt Smith. So they're talking about the succession. There's Daemon Valerian, played by Matt Smith. That's Rhaenyra. Now, what's going on is this, okay? Jaehaerys, we'll go back to the placard there. So Jaehaerys reigned a long time, like 50 plus years, okay? And he was a great and wise king. Everyone loved him. And I mean, and he, for the longest time, he only had a daughter. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get the sequence right. No. So he named Aemon his heir, right? And then, so Balon and Aemon and everyone got along. There was no problems there, right? So there was a war. Aemon died. So the proper lineage by our real world would have been to go to Rhaenys Targaryen, okay? But in Westeros and most of the continents on the planet and all that, they never let women inherit. I mean, but unless there's no other options outside of the Dornish people, okay? So Balon Targaryen became the Prince of Dragonstone, which is the title for the heir to the Iron Throne, okay? So immediately that created conflict between Rhaenys and Balon, okay? Now, there could have been reunification here because Rhaenys had a daughter and Balon had a son, and the proposal was to marry those two together to reunify, okay? And that didn't happen, and that further pissed off Rhaenys, okay? Balon had two sons. He had Viserys and Daemon, as I said, the half-brothers, right? Now, we've already established the female will be skipped, right? But then when Viserys heir should have been Daemon, okay? So when he only had by his first wife, Rhaenyra, he however said Rhaenyra was going to be his heir. And Daemon, who had been his best friend, close confidant, was kind of outraged by that, okay? So, and also, Viserys, he had his, basically the kingdom kind of backed Rhaenyra, so to speak. And then he had another son by another wife, Aegon II, as I mentioned. Daemon chose Rhaenyra's side and eventually married her. And then they had the Dance of Dragons, the Civil War, and then Rhaenys backed Rhaenyra for her own reasons, okay? And then you had the Civil War called the Dance of Dragons, which is what this is about. And we're seeing the events leading into that. So let's go back to the trailer. See, Viserys, his brother is Daemon, his daughter is Rhaenyra. I mean, you could have just married them together and solved the whole problem. For the Targs, that's nothing. That's Rhaenyra. And this is the whole naming a new heir. That was Daemon being told he's not the heir anymore. So let's finish this trailer. The trailer's almost done. Now visually, it looks like it looks like Game of Thrones. It's on par. It's decent quality. We're not going to quibble. They know how to. They probably still have the sets around and all the costumes and whatever. And in terms of the setting, I'm not going to quibble any of that. I don't think this is going to be a badly done series, unlike how Game of Thrones finished. It's because they know how this ends, and they know they're not going to make that same mistake going into it. Okay, I'm not opposed to this prequel. I would have rather have seen the prequel with the War of the Usurper. It would have been more relevant to me. But with what happens in this trailer, in this time period, it doesn't interest me as a reader. I mean, I enjoyed the book, but it didn't interest me greatly enough to want to see a TV series of it. Okay, so again, more. This is a lot of this is just clipping on between the same 5 people saying that they're going to fight over the throne with a couple of fight scenes thrown in. It's. I really wish they had shown instead of showing a teaser, like have half of it be teaser and have like 30 seconds or a minute of one scene, so you can actually see what's going on. Okay, and I know people are going to quibble over the black gentleman playing the character. Given where they are on the world, it's not impossible for there to be a black-haired blonde guy. It's not viable, but not possible. So that's the least of our concern to wokeizing it. Okay, so that's what we saw. Now we can get rid of that. We're not going to go through this. There's not a lot in this trailer to pick apart as far as that stuff goes. Okay, so now you saw a reference to a couple of events, right? So when Balon dies, right? We already had the established precedent that we skip the female, right? Okay, we skip over Rhaenyra's Targaryen, right? Balon dies, and then Rhaenys and Viserys, as well as and Daemon, a whole bunch of others, all say we should be the king or the queen or whatever, right? So they call a great council together, the first great council, which says no, and they immediately discount the 2 female claimants to the throne because they're female. Okay? And then they look at the rest and say, and you have Viserys and one other dude who the final vote comes down to, and supposedly Viserys wins by like 20-1. Okay, and Viserys wasn't a horrible king, but then we got the problem with Viserys, and Viserys' brother, who is his heir, was loyal to him. And I think if Viserys had had a son first, or had skipped Rhaenyra and said, okay, you're my heir unless I get a son to his brother, that never would have been a problem there. I'm talking about the book. But we seem to be right at the point in the book, in the show, when all this is happening. Meaning, like from the clip, we see that Viserys is naming his daughter his heir, and the scene we see Daemon walk into the throne, that's him telling Daemon that he's not the heir anymore and so forth. So I think that's what seems to be happening there. Okay, there's not a lot to be outraged over in this trailer. I'm just trying. I enjoyed the look of it's okay. The actor, Matt Smith's a great actor, so he can play Daemon Targaryen, no problem there. So, so like I said, it looks like Game of Thrones. They'll probably have the usual, adult material and blah blah blah. But and they'll have dragon spam. They know that they have dragons galore in this, So we'll see. Now, if they really go all out, a lot of dragons should happen in the show. So tentatively, I'm slightly enthusiastic with caveats. So Part of me wants to watch this. I enjoyed the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, as I mentioned before, despite its faults and changes. Another part wants to avoid anything Martin produces until he gives us, at the very least, the win's a winner and a commitment to letting someone else finish the series if he dies. Martin's like 70-something years old now, okay? And he's been writing Win's a Winner for like 10 plus years. And so I doubt we're ever going to see it, but who knows? You know, I'm also upset that he has 2 other people who could write this the sequel to Fire and Blood, and then he could just edit it, because he'd edit 3 or 4 books a year. So it's just annoying. So I'll probably watch, but it's got to be really good to draw me in, given how Game of Thrones ended and how down I am on Martin's product. But I consider the TV shows to be loosely based and separate from Martin's book, so to speak. Now, I've also heard that changes in both Rhaenys and Rhaenyra, who were problematic characters, and like based on how they're depicted in the histories, they weren't likely to make great queens, so to speak. Okay, so I heard that they're going woke with those 2 characters, in which case I'd get turned off really fast. Okay? So anyway, comment down below if you have any questions for me about this video. Please share your thoughts. Share this video if you enjoyed it. Like if you like. Dislike if you dislike. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. My name is Matt. This has been Unbearable 73. Have a nice day, and I am out of here.